Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere sacred, ancient, and golden. Imagine the cliffs of Delphi at dusk, the warm sun sinking behind olive trees, and a breeze that seems to hum with forgotten music. You're not just visiting a ruin, you're walking the edge of a god's memory. You stand at the navel of the ancient world, the Omphalos, where people once waited days just to hear a whisper from Apollo's priestess, and where one song, never sung again, still lingers beneath the stone. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, and tell me where in the world are you listening from, and what time is it for you? Now dim the lights and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand at Delphi's edge. The sun is bowing out in shades of blood orange and gold, casting long shadows across the sacred precinct. Cypress trees stab at the sky like ancient quills, and somewhere below your sandals, marble cracks hold the breath of centuries. There's a feeling in your chest like someone once sang here so beautifully the earth itself hasn't quite exhaled since. And you're right, they say Apollo came here in spring, not just once, always spring. He was seasonal, off to the Hyperboreans in winter, lounging with mysterious northern folks no one really believed in. Historians still argue whether Hyperborea referred to a real people or just a poetic myth. But if you've ever tasted snow so clean it feels like silence, maybe you've been there too. Anyway, back to Delphi. You wander through the remains of the Temple of Apollo. The columns are jagged now, like missing teeth in a god's jaw, but the shape still holds. You trace your fingers along the stone and think, this is where it happened, where a song began and where it ended on purpose. See that old theatre nearby? Once voices soared there. Poets, prophets, possibly even the god himself, if you believe those fragments of Hesiod that scholars dismiss with a polite shrug. They don't like thinking about God singing in public. It ruins the academic mood. But here's your first mainstream historical fact. Delphi was once considered the spiritual center of the world by ancient Greeks, not Athens, not Sparta. Here, this crack in the cliffs watched over by a golden god who understood melody better than justice. A chill rolls in from the mountains. You pull your cloak tighter. Well, maybe it's a hoodie. Apollo wouldn't mind. He was always a little ahead of fashion anyway. You head toward the old treasuries. These were once small temple-like buildings where cities stored lavish offerings to show off. Like, look how rich and pious we are, don't mess with us. That's where you find the strange statue, not labelled, not listed on the tourist guides, half melted, barely recognizable. But if you tilt your head just right, you swear the figure is holding a lyre and listening, not playing. That's the part that gets you. No strings, no sound, just stillness. You pause. Somewhere above, a bird shrieks, one of those black and white alpine choughs. It cuts through the air like a cracked note, and for a second you wonder if the gods did once walk here, if one of them, golden and laughing, plucked a string that stilled the wind. Oh, fun fringe fact, the Pythia, the priestess of Apollo, used to sit on a tripod over a chasm that allegedly emitted sweet-smelling vapors. Ancient tourists believed the fumes gave her visions. Modern archaeologists, well, they're split. Some say there's evidence of ethylene gas from fault lines below. Others say, yeah, or maybe she was just naturally dramatic. You know how it is with oracles. You step beyond the columns now, looking out over the cliffs. The valley unfolds like a robe dropped at your feet. This is where your journey begins, not just through myth, but through the soul of a god who knew beauty too well, and who chose one day to silence it. The wind changes as you step away from the temple, ruins brushing against your cheeks like a whisper from someone ancient. The air is laced with olive pollen and thyme, sun-kissed, sleepy, and just a little bitter. You close your eyes and suddenly the cliffs dissolve. The marble disappears. You're no longer in Delphi. You're somewhere warmer, brighter, quieter. You're on Delos. No, not the resort island with yachts and white umbrellas. We're talking about the Delos of gods, sacred trembling, barely anchored to the earth when Leto arrived there, swollen with prophecy and divine twins. She'd been chased, poor thing. Hera, queen of Olympus and certified drama queen, was absolutely not on board with Zeus's latest divine romance. She forbade Leto from giving birth on any land under the sun. And land being land and the sun being the sun, well, that made things tricky. But Delos, you see, was a floating island, a loophole. And so with the island trembling under her bare feet, Leto gave birth beneath olive leaves and the gaze of the soft, uncertain dawn. First came Artemis, fierce, watchful, already complete somehow. Then came Apollo, wrapped in gold light. He didn't cry. And here's your mainstream historical fact. In ancient Greek art, Apollo is almost always depicted as beardless and eternally youthful. Think about it. A god of music, prophecy, and plague, but also the embodiment of an ideal young man, not the burly, bearded Zeus type. Apollo's smooth face was a symbol of control, intelligence, and beauty that never aged. Back on Delos, though, the locals claim something odd happened when he was born. Birdsong stopped. Cicadas froze mid-buzz. Waves paused mid-crash. Even Artemis, known for her sharp tongue, said nothing. Because the first sound Apollo made wasn't a cry. It was a single hum, just one note, clear and golden, that seemed to touch the bones of the island and say, "I am here." Quirky side note, some fringe archaeologists suggest that early hymns to Apollo were inspired by tuning systems from Mesopotamia, which, if true, would mean the god of music debuted with imported scales. Not a bad way to build a following. You walk the beaches of Delos now, where sand crunches beneath your feet like old shells, and the shadows of forgotten temples stretch long in the low sun. A few goats bleat from a distant hill. They've always been here, those goats gods, or no gods. Apollo grew quickly, as gods tend to do. By sunset of his birthday, he was already walking fluent in music, fluent in charm, fluent in overachieving. He strung his first lyre from the sinew of imagination and the leftovers of mythic beasts. Okay, not literally, but it sounds cooler that way. Historians still argue whether Apollo's earliest instrument was the lyre or the kithara, both stringed, both sacred, but one slightly more bougie. Either way, his fingers touched strings the way poets touch longing. Not just to play, but to pull something real from the air. And that's what you feel now, standing on Delos. Not noise, not silence, resonance. You sit beneath an olive tree and listen. There's an echo here, soft as breath, bright as a match. It's not a song you can hum. It's the kind of melody that reminds you of someone you haven't met yet. The kind that lives in your ribs like a memory trying to be born. And somewhere behind you, in that golden shimmer between sleep and memory, a young god plucks a string and smiles. But not all smiles mean joy, and not all music is meant to last. The olive tree fades, the light shifts, Your bare feet now touch dry, dusty earth. You're no longer on Delos. You're somewhere wild, hot wind, low shrubs, the distant clicking of cicadas playing backup percussion. And there it is the lyre. It rests in the crook of a rock, half shadowed, half glowing, but it's not quite the golden, polished instrument you imagine. This one's humbler, cruder. And the shell is unmistakable. A tortoise, yes, really. See, Apollo didn't invent the lyre. That credit goes to Hermes, Apollo's baby brother, and arguably the most chaotic infant in mythology. The story goes like this, baby. Hermes, probably still in diapers, stole Apollo's sacred cattle, walked them backward to confuse the tracks, and then, because why not killed a tortoise, hollowed out its shell and strung gut across it. Boom. Lyre. Mainstream historical fact. The lyre did evolve from simple stringed instruments made from animal shells and sinew. In early cultures, music was born from nature's leftovers, bone flutes, shell harps, even wind, whistling through reeds. So Hermes' little invention might not be so far-fetched, mythically speaking. Back to the story. When Apollo caught him, he was furious. Imagine being the god of music robbed by a newborn. But then Hermes' tiny hands, and all played the lyre. Just a few notes, enough to make Apollo's golden rage melt like honey in the sun. He didn't punish his brother. He offered a trade. Keep the cows, give me the lyre. And just like that, Apollo became the god of music, of harmony, of elegance, of all things that hum beneath the skin. But here's where things get weird. There's an old myth, rarely told, about a lizard that lived beneath Apollo's first lyre, not inside it, beneath it. It stayed with him curled under the instrument whenever he played. No one else could see it except for a few priests and the occasional mad poet. Some say it whispered notes to him. Others say it devoured the bad ones. Fringe, tidbit alert. In certain lost Orphic hymns, a creature called phonos, meaning murder or voice, is described as clinging to Apollo's instrument. Scholars think it was a metaphor, but you're not so sure. You reach for the lyre, now its tortoise shell warm beneath your fingers. The strings hum even before you pluck them, like they know something's coming. You kneel, hold it against your chest and strum. The first note shivers the dust. The second pulls a cicada into silence. The third, you stop. Because they're just beneath your palms, something moves. A flicker, a twitch, a whisper of scales. You drop the lyre, it clatters to the rock strings, ringing out in a discordant cascade. And for a moment, everything stops, even your breath, because maybe some songs, some instruments aren't just tools. Maybe they're homes, maybe they're cages. Historians still argue whether Apollo's first lyre was a divine gift or a divine mistake, whether it elevated him or tethered him. After all, gods are not immune to obsession. And Apollo more than most understood the cost of beauty. You sit in the dust heart, still skipping from what may or may not have just moved under your hand, and above you a hawk cries out across the hills, its call piercing and unresolved, like a song that ends on the wrong chord. Or a god who once heard something terrible in his own music and never told a soul. Your hands are still tingling as you leave the lyre behind. The path twists upward now into rocky hills veined with olive trees and sunburnt thyme. The air is dry, like it's been holding a breath for centuries. You follow the trail as it coils through the past towards something darker. The ground begins to change. It hums beneath your feet, and the color of the rocks deepens, burnt sienna like rusted blood. You've arrived at the mouth of an ancient cave, and you know what waits inside. The python,
not the one from your modern programming class, the original Python. The serpent beast guardian of Delphi before Apollo claimed it. Big, twisted, smelled like death and old mushrooms. Ancient myths describe it as a dragon-serpent hybrid that oozed sickness, and honestly, you'd believe it. But here's your mainstream historical fact. Delphi was originally a site for the worship of Gaia the Earth Mother, long before Apollo ever showed up. The python in many ways was her guardian spirit. Apollo's slaying of the python symbolized a shift from chthonic earth worship to Olympian sky god dominance. Casual theological colonization. You step into the cool dark. The walls of the cave are slick with age. No torches, no voices, just the drip of ancient water, echoing like distant applause. And there it is, the scene frozen in myth. Apollo, golden bow in hand, standing in stark contrast to the mottled horror of the python. He fires and fires again. They say it took 9 arrows, one for each muse, whispered some poets, one for each regret, muttered others. But the strangest part, he didn't sing. You'd think a god of music would slay a beast with a melody or a crescendo, but no. Apollo was silent, focused, and when the serpent finally coiled its last, its body steaming with divine venom, he stood there, unblinking. Quirky fringe detail. One lost hymn claims that the python didn't just die, it sang back. That in its death throes it echoed Apollo's name in a warped guttural parody, like a dying harmony refusing to go quietly. You step deeper into the cave. The stone beneath you feels soft, in places crumbled scales maybe. Apollo buried the python's remains beneath what would later become the Temple of Apollo at Delphi. Right beneath the omphalos, that's right. Every prophecy, every divine utterance from the Pythia was spoken above a monster's corpse. Historians still argue whether this was symbolic, strategic, or if it just made for killer acoustics. You find a shard of bone at your feet, maybe animal, maybe ancient snack. But it hums faintly when you pick it up. You drop it quickly. Some things aren't meant to be held. When Apollo claimed Delphi, he didn't just kill a beast. He rewrote the music of the land. No more groaning earth songs, just golden harmonies and orderly hymns. The Pythia now inhaled vapors from the python's grave. Her voice became his, or so he thought. You exit the cave blinking in the sudden light. The sun god had won, but something about that win still lingers in the shadows. You wonder as you follow the trail down the hill whether Apollo ever truly celebrated his victory, or if he knew even then that his brightest songs would forever echo against the hollow of something he silenced. The sunlight is sharp when you emerge from the cave, almost too bright after the damp hush of that ancient wound in the earth. You blink against it, squinting toward the coast. And there, distant and glittering, you see the sea. But this isn't just any coastline. This is the place where a song once stilled a storm. You follow the path toward it, sandals crunching over white gravel that sparkles like powdered pearl. The air grows saltier, and the roar of the Aegean hums in your ribs. Closer, closer, until you arrive at a weathered marble pillar beside the cliffs. No inscription, just one symbol chiseled deep, a lyre with broken strings. The story goes like this. A fleet of ships once left Mycenae carrying offerings to Delphi, gold, wine, poets. But a terrible storm rose up halfway across the water, lightning screaming winds waves like furious gods, punching holes in the sky. The sailors begged for mercy. They offered prayers, burnt bits of salted meat, even their wine. And still the sea raged, until one man, some say he was a singer, others say a runaway priest of Apollo, stood on the deck and played a lyre, not to calm the sea, not to command it, just because it was the last thing he could do. And then something impossible happened. The wind paused, not stopped exactly, but slowed, as if listening. The thunder faded to a low murmur, and the waves, they bent away from the ship like dancers in a slow-motion bow. The man played one final note and died on the spot. No wound, no fall, just silence, like the music had taken him in exchange. Mainstream historical fact, ancient Greek sailors did often sing hymns to Apollo before voyages, especially when passing Cape Malea, an infamously dangerous stretch of water. They believed his music could steady the sea, which, if you've ever driven a small boat during karaoke night, may actually check out. Now here's your fringe tidbit: on certain islands in the Cyclades, fishermen still refuse to whistle on the water. It tempts the old song, they say. Some even throw a stringless lyre into the sea once a year, just to keep it sleeping. You sit at the cliff edge, feet dangling above blue, so deep it makes the sky jealous. The breeze smells like brine and thyme, and it's easy to imagine that song, that one note, still echoing through the waves. But Apollo never played it again, never sang of it, never even mentioned it in his myths. Historians still argue whether the story is allegory or cautionary tale. Did Apollo silence that melody to protect mortals, or did he fear what might answer back if he played it twice? You lean back on your elbows, letting the sun warm your skin. Some songs aren't forbidden, just forgotten on purpose. And when the breeze shifts just slightly, you swear the waves hum something ancient. A low, distant note, not loud, not angry, just listening. The cliffs fade behind you as the sun slips lower, casting amber across the hills. You walk a path bordered by whispering reeds and long-forgotten footprints. Ahead, the land turns green, wild, and strange. You've arrived at a grove, cool, shaded, and heavy with the scent of laurel.
And there, half hidden behind the boughs, she runs, Daphne. Not like the paintings, no flowing gown, no romantic music swelling in the background. She runs like she's out of time, hair tangled, feet bruised, breath ragged. Her heartbeat drums in the dirt behind her, and chasing her, not with a sneer but with pleading eyes, is Apollo. He doesn't want to harm her, he wants her to love him. And that is the problem. You step into the grove branches, parting around you like reluctant curtains. This is not a moment of triumph. This is a moment of desperation, hers and his. Apollo had been struck by one of Eros's arrows, gold-tipped of course. Desire bloomed in him like wildfire. Daphne. She got the lead-tipped version, the one that makes love curdle into fear. Classic God behavior: fall in love, expect compliance, and then cry when it all goes sideways. Mainstream historical fact. The laurel tree did become Apollo's sacred symbol, often worn as a crown by poets and victors. But that's not just honor, it's memory. The myth of Daphne was told and retold to explain that symbolism. Laurel wasn't just pretty, it was a frozen no. You see her pause now, heart pounding like a war drum. Apollo reaches for her voice, shaking. Please. That's all he says. Just that, and then it happens. Her feet root, her arms branch, her skin turns to bark. Leaves spill from her hair. Fringe detail. Some versions of the myth say it wasn't just Daphne who changed. That in the final moment, as her voice was swallowed by sap, Apollo heard something so raw, so pleading in her transformation, that he wept sap himself. That part doesn't make it into statues, but it lingers in the old songs. Apollo doesn't touch the tree. He falls to his knees beside it, silent. Then after a long while he stands. He doesn't curse Eros, doesn't rage. He simply declares the laurel sacred to him, that its leaves will crown every poet, every champion, that he will remember.
But what he doesn't say, what he never says is this. He never sings about Daphne, not once, not in all his hymns, not even a whisper. Historians still debate whether this silence was noble or cowardly, a mark of respect or of shame. Did he choose not to turn her pain into art? Or did the music refuse to come? You brush your fingers along a laurel branch. The leaves shiver like memory. Some gods compose symphonies of victory, but this one, he learned that sometimes the most powerful song is the one you never write. The grove closes behind you. The laurel leaves rustle, once then settle, as if exhaling the last of a name no longer spoken. You follow a narrow trail downhill, now into a quieter, gentler valley. The air here is soft, heavy with bees and blooming thyme. A river curls through the meadow like a ribbon dropped by the gods, and beside it sits a boy, small, quiet and shining with something not quite mortal. His name that depends on who you ask. Some call him Linus, others Orpheus's shadow. A few whispers in ancient texts name him Ion, son of Apollo, and a mortal woman, though even that tale shifts in the telling. What remains constant is this he sang. And when he did, the world listened. You sit beside him now. He doesn't notice. His fingers trace patterns in the dust. He's humming. No words, just tone. You can feel it in your throat even though he barely opens his mouth. It's the kind of sound that makes flowers turn birds hush and grown men forget their armor. Mainstream historical fact. In several Greek city-states, music education began as early as age 7, and certain cults believed divine children could inherit musical powers directly from Apollo. Songs were not just art, they were presence, sacred, dangerous. This child sings like someone remembering something older than language, and Apollo listens. You see him there, just beyond the olive trees. He doesn't approach.
He watches, posture tense, brow furrowed, not with jealousy, but something worse, recognition. This boy doesn't just mimic the god's music, he understands it too well, and that's the problem. The fringe version of this myth. Some say the child was the first to sing a melody that caused silence to weep, that he played the lyre, and the strings bent not with sound but with grief. One account even claims he sang a note that made the river reverse. For one breathless minute the water flowed backward. Historians still argue whether this was meant to elevate the child's status or to explain his vanishing, because he did vanish. Every version agrees on that. The boy finishes his song, looks up, sees Apollo. They lock eyes, not with fear, not even awe, just knowing. And then quietly the boy stands, walks to the river, and steps into it. No splash, no ripple, just gone. Apollo doesn't move, doesn't chase. He turns away. And that night, a song disappears from his repertoire. You walk down to where the boy vanished. The water is still. And then just beneath the surface you see it. A shimmer, like a musical note folded into light. You can't hear it, but you feel the loss. Some songs aren't silenced because they're dangerous. Some are silenced because they remind even gods of what they cannot protect. You leave the quiet river behind, its glassy surface still trembling with the echo of a child's melody. The path before you hardens less meadow, now more dust thorns and stone. Even the air feels sharper, drier, as if the trees themselves are holding their breath. You pass under low, gnarled oaks and arrive at a clearing unlike any you've seen so far.
There's no shrine here, no ruins, just silence. And then you hear it. Pipes. Not flutes, not lyres, pipes. Reed-bound and ancient. The sound is raw, alive, and just slightly wrong. Like something wild trying to imitate civilization. Or maybe the other way around. There, beneath a knotted fig tree, stands Marsyas. Tall, red-haired half-goat, if the rumours are true. A satyr, or maybe just a man who laughed too loud at the wrong gods. His cheeks puff as he plays. The notes curl and bite at the air. And Apollo watches. From the shadows, the story unfolds without words. Marsyas had found the Aulos double pipes, supposedly invented and discarded by Athena herself. He played them beautifully, too beautifully, word spread. And soon Marsyas declared, perhaps after a few too many cups of wine, that he could outplay Apollo himself. And Apollo accepted. Here comes your mainstream historical fact. Musical contests were a real and respected tradition in the ancient world. Festivals like the Pythian Games included musical competitions as part of their rituals. And yes, some involved judging by divine favor, meaning if lightning struck you mid-performance, you probably lost. Back in the clearing, a crowd forms gods' nymphs, maybe a squirrel or two. Apollo steps into the light gold radiating from his skin like smugness incarnate. He plays first. The lyre sings under his fingers. Precision, beauty, perfection. Then Marsyas plays. It's raw, chaotic, but alive. The judges waver. And Apollo, being the well-adjusted deity that he is, changes the rules. Let's add singing, he says, knowing Marsyas's pipes can't accompany a voice. It's cheating, basically. But when you're divine, it's called strategy. Apollo wins. Marsyas bows his head, maybe in defeat, maybe in disgust. And here comes the part we've all heard, the part softened in later tellings, that Apollo flayed Marsyas alive for his hubris, hung him from a tree, peeled back his skin like a musician disassembling an instrument. Fringe detail. In one rare Phrygian tablet, the story ends differently. It claims Apollo didn't punish Marsyas with death, but with silence. He took the pipes and sealed them inside a cave. Marsyas wandered the hills. After that mute, his fingers always twitching like they still heard the music, trapped inside him. Historians still argue whether the brutality of the tale reflects an actual ritual origin, some kind of scapegoat rite, or simply a poetic warning, never challenge the gods in their own domain. You approach the fig tree, it leans strangely, and there carved into its bark is a symbol you've seen before, a lyre with broken strings. Apollo never played that contest's tune again. He never hummed it, and no mortal dared play the pipes for centuries, because winning isn't always victory, and silencing your rival doesn't make the music yours. You move through the fading light with heavier steps now. Something about the air feels tighter, like you've passed through a place where the gods exhale just a little less often. The wind is dry again, but this time it carries the scent of pine, smoke and wine, distant parties, cracked sandals, and the warm, sticky sweetness of hubris. You arrive at a sun-bleached hill where laughter echoes among stone terraces. A crowd has gathered, men with wild beards and women in vine crowns, half-drunk philosophers maybe. They're leaning in toward a throne, not of marble, just carved wood, grape-stained and wobbling slightly. And in that throne, King Midas, yes, that Midas, of the golden touch, of the very poor decisions. But tonight it's not gold he's obsessed with, it's music. Apollo stands at one side of the clearing, serene, barefoot, golden as ever, and across from him stands Pan, half man, half goat, fully not here for Apollo's polish. Pan, with his scraggly beard and untamed eyes, clutches his panpipes like a challenge wrapped in bark. This is the contest no one asked for, but everyone came to watch. Pan plays first. His music is wild, earthy, and unfiltered. It tumbles out like the smell of wet moss after a thunderstorm. It doesn't care about rhythm, it's freedom, it's chaos. And it makes a few goats dance involuntarily in the background. Respect. Apollo steps forward next. He lifts his lyre and plays, and of course it's flawless, not just technical, divine. Notes that hang in the air like spun sunlight, weaving visions into the minds of everyone listening. Forests in bloom cities, rising lovers, remembering each other's names after years. The crowd claps, they cheer, they look to King Midas, and here comes your mainstream historical fact. Midas was a real figure, or rather, a name used by multiple Phrygian kings. One inscription mentions a Midas who built a palace in Gordian, likely in the 8th century BCE, so yes, the name is historical. The donkey ears, maybe not so much. Back to the contest. Midas clears his throat and says, I think, Pan was better. Apollo blinks, the crowd goes silent. Somewhere a wine cup is dropped, and Apollo, not being one to handle artistic rejection, well grants Midas a brand new pair of ears, donkey ears, big, fuzzy, involuntarily twitching, fringe myth alert. In one obscure variant, Midas actually liked the ears, said they helped him hear the music of ants in the soil. He wore a hood out of social pressure, not shame. Historians still argue whether this part of the myth was satire, maybe a jab at tasteless aristocrats. Or maybe it was a commentary on divine overreaction. Apollo won, but he still punished someone for not clapping hard enough. You walk through the silent aftermath. The lyre lies abandoned on a rock. Its strings are intact, but something's different. One string is snapped, not broken by force, but gently unwound, as if the god himself loosened it. Apollo never played that tune again. Did he regret overreacting, or did the discord from Pan's music lodge itself somewhere in his perfect mind? Never fully shaking loose, you pause beside the lyre. Some victories taste bitter, especially when you hear the wrong kind of silence afterward. The hill quiets behind you, and now your path winds westward, across fields dappled with late sunlight and Roman ambition. You step through the rustle of foreign laurel trees, their leaves imported, planted by hands that once whispered prayers in Latin, not Greek. Marble litters the ground, etched not with mythic symbols, but imperial eagles. You're not in Greece anymore. You're in Rome, because Apollo, like all great brands, was eventually franchised. You stroll into the heart of Palatine Hill, where emperors once walked under colonnades claiming divine heritage. And there, between marble pillars and cracked mosaics, you see the golden god's image, polished, perfected, revised. They didn't just borrow him, they reshaped him. Augustus, the first emperor, practically made Apollo his divine sponsor. The god's temple stood proudly near his own house. Poets like Horace and Propertius wrote hymns glorifying him. But make no mistake, it wasn't about music or prophecy. It was about image. Apollo wasn't just the god of the lyre, he became the god of order. Mainstream historical fact, Augustus strategically associated himself with Apollo to distance his rule from the chaos of civil war. By aligning with a god of light, healing, and harmony, he crafted a persona of calm control emperor as curator of golden civilization. And yes, his statues conveniently resembled Apollo's youthful features, classic PR move, but Rome's version of Apollo lacked something. You notice it as you walk the forum. The frescoes, the sculptures, they're all smooth, sanitized. The lyre is always perfect, the posture always poised, but none of them feel like the Apollo who once wept beside a laurel tree or sat in silence after losing a child's song. It's all branding, and yet there's one spot. Hidden, cracked, barely intact, a faded mural in a side room of the Palatine Temple. Apollo stands alone. No worshippers, no laurels. Just him holding a lyre with frayed strings. And painted behind him a Roman senator slumped and weary, as if trying to listen to a music that won't come. You linger there. This version of Apollo looks tired, not defeated, but aware. A fringe detail unearthed in 19th century Rome mentions a banned ode written by an anonymous poet, likely a woman, claiming Apollo warned Augustus in a dream never to perform a certain song. Too bright, he said, too final. Historians still argue whether this was political propaganda or a relic of earlier myths carried westward. But you get the sense that Rome didn't just inherit Apollo, it inherited his silence too. You walk away from the ruins down the old stone steps where senators once debated fate, and the sky turns the color of burnt bronze. Somewhere behind you in a forgotten shrine, a lyre string may still hum when the wind hits just right, but no one hears it. Because here in Rome, Apollo gave them his light, but kept his darkest melody for himself. The Roman dust fades from your sandals as the sky deepens to a velvet dusk. You walk now through tall pines and sloping hills, quiet under a pale moon. And it's here where the stars begin to whisper stories again that you feel another presence. Cool, watching, unyielding, she steps from the shadows like a wind across silver leaves. Artemis, your twin sister Apollo, and the only god in the entire pantheon who doesn't flinch in your light. You follow her now at a distance. She doesn't wait, doesn't slow. The deer at her heels glide silently through the forest, their hooves barely touching the earth. She's not cruel, just precise, like moonlight slipping through a crack and refusing to apologize. You remember growing up together on Delos in Olympus in whispers between constellations. You were twins, yes, but not equals, not rivals either, just reflections in opposing waters. She ruled the dark with cold clarity. You lit the day with blinding brilliance, and somewhere between you, dusk. The only time you felt close. Mainstream historical fact. In early Greek cult practices, Artemis and Apollo were often worshipped together as dual deities of balance, light, and wildness, prophecy, and instinct. Temples to both stood in places of transition, coastal inlets, mountain ridges, borderlands, as if even their worshippers knew they thrived in the spaces between. You watch now as Artemis pauses beside a moonlit stream. She kneels, dips her fingers into the water and listens to what you're not sure, maybe the one thing you can't hear. Silence. You were always loud, Apollo, even your beauty had volume. You chased love like it owed you something. She ran from it like it was a trap. And yet, there were times when you looked at each other across a battlefield, across a throne room, across a sky, and neither of you spoke. Not out of contempt, out of knowing, fringe myth. A little-known Thessalian tale claims that once, just once, Apollo and Artemis argued, not about love, not about justice, but about a song. Apollo wanted to play a melody that would resurrect a mortal boy. Artemis refused. The world must carry silence too, she said. The story ends there. No one wins. Historians still argue whether this myth reflects differing cult values, Apollo's association with civilization versus Artemis's with the untamed. But the emotional truth lingers. Even gods can't always harmonize. She rises now, brushing silver dust from her knees. Her eyes meet yours, not angry, not sad, just resolute. She vanishes into the trees without a word. You stand alone, moonlight painting your skin in pale echoes. There are songs you never wrote, not because you forgot, but because she never would have forgiven you. You walk on. The night follows quiet and aware. Not every silence is lonely. Some are boundaries made sacred. The forest thins as dawn pushes gently at the horizon. Your footsteps lead you into a wide field drenched in lavender light, and there in the center, surrounded by wildflowers and wind, he stands, or rather he stood. Hyacinthus. A boy carved from youth and sunlight, the kind of beauty that made even gods hesitate. And you, Apollo, did not hesitate. You loved him. Openly, brilliantly, maybe too much. He loved you back, they say, at least for a while. You sit at the edge of the field dew, soaking through your tunic, watching the story play out as if you haven't already memorized it from every crack in your own heart. It was a game after all, just a game, throwing a discus back and forth, laughing, competing, teasing, and then it happened. A gust of wind, sudden, sharp, unnatural. Your discus veered off course. Some say it was your fault, others say it was Zephyrus, the jealous west wind, who had been watching, fuming, heartbroken, unseen. It struck Hyacinthus in the head. He fell. And you fell beside him? Mainstream historical fact. The myth of Hyacinthus became the center of ritual mourning festivals in Sparta called the Hyacinthia. Over 3 days, boys and men honored youth, death, and rebirth. It wasn't just grief, it was cultural memory. Myth turned calendar. You cradle the boy in your arms. You kiss his forehead, his cheeks, his blood-slicked curls. You whisper songs, prayers, desperate bargains to every god who might listen, even the ones you don't like. Nothing works, he dies. You could have raised him, you could have. But Artemis's voice still echoes. The world must carry silence. So you let him go, and from his blood you cause a flower to bloom. A violet curl, delicate, petal soft, bearing the letters AI, AI, a cry of grief etched in nature. The hyacinth. Your apology made root and color, fringe detail. Some versions say the flower was not a hyacinth as we know it, but an iris or larkspur. Whatever it was, the ancients agreed it grew from sorrow and lingered near shrines to Apollo. You kneel in the field now, brushing your hand through the flowers. They seem to lean toward your fingers, hungry for warmth, but you do not sing. You have never sung for him, not once. Historians still argue whether this silence was guilt reverence or restraint, whether the absence of a hymn was its own kind of requiem. After all, you gave him a flower, not a melody, and maybe that's because music can fade, but flowers return every spring. The wind carries you from the field of flowers into a place of tense groans and shadows. The air here is thick, not just with dust, but with sickness. You wrinkle your nose instinctively.
There's something bitter beneath the olive oil and vinegar, something metallic, something dying. You're in the midst of a war camp. Not just any war, the war. Troy. Bronze gleaming in the sun. Tempers hotter than the armor. And somewhere in the chaos, your name is being shouted by soldiers who don't even believe in poetry. Because now, Apollo, you're not the god of music. You're the god of plague. You step between the tents, careful not to touch the linen. The men here are sick, really sick. Eyes bloodshot, lips cracked, skin damp and too pale. They moan in sleep, dream in fever, die before they can scream. Mainstream historical fact. The Iliad opens not with battle but with you, with Apollo sending a plague through the Achaean camp in retaliation for Agamemnon dishonoring your priest and refusing to return his daughter. 10 days of divine disease, because even in war, disrespect a bard and the god of music becomes the god of misery. You walk past rows of bodies, some shrouded,
Some not, all quiet. And then, on a nearby rock, you see it, your bow, leaned casually as if it hadn't just sung death across the Aegean. Beside it, an empty quiver. The arrows are gone. Fired one by one, each carrying pestilence as their payload. Fringe tidbit. Some ancient fragments suggest your arrows didn't spread disease, but unlocked it that the plague already slept inside the camp, and your music merely woke it up. Like a forgotten chord struck on a rotten string. You stand still. You don't cry. You're divine after all, but the Pythia, yes, your oracle once whispered that in the 10th night of the plague you visited the camp in person, that you sat beside a dying soldier, that you touched his forehead, and that he whispered, "Will you sing again when this is over?" You didn't answer. Historians still argue whether this moment marks Apollo's descent from art into wrath, or whether it shows that even beauty, when dishonored, becomes dangerous. You leave the tent city. The sun rises warm but indifferent, and you do not sing. Not for the dying, not for the living. Some days, Apollo, even your golden voice is a weapon, and silence is the only mercy left. The scent of sickness lingers behind you as you climb into higher terrain, rocky, solemn, and shrouded in pine. You know where you're going, or rather, who you're going to see. She waits inside the stone, behind the smoke, beneath the laurel leaves that never quite rustle unless she's breathing. The Pythia, your priestess, the one who speaks your words but not always the way you intended. You step into the adyton, the inner sanctum of Delphi. The air is hazy with incense, but something else dances through it tonight, a sharpness. Like burnt honey, the ground under your feet is warm. Too warm. The earth here never forgets the python buried beneath. Mainstream historical fact. The Pythia, or Oracle of Delphi, sat on a tripod over a chasm believed to release divine vapors. She spoke in trance, and male priests interpreted her words. Some scholars now believe she inhaled ethylene gas from geologic fault lines, an ancient, accidental hallucinogen. Others, still on the fence. The argument continues. Tonight your priestess is already mid-vision. She rocks slightly, eyes half-lidded, lips twitching. Her voice rises not in words, but in tones, short, uneven syllables that sound more like song than speech. You step closer, listening. And then she says it, a name, one you recognize instantly. The name of a song, the song you buried, not literally but close. You composed it centuries ago in the aftermath of grief, played it once, maybe twice, and then sealed it away, under stone, under memory, under temple. And somehow, she knows. She speaks again. The name of the melody, the rhythm of its breath, the 3 forbidden notes that when played together are said to unravel even time. You blink. She is still. But then her head snaps toward you, and for just a moment, it is not your voice she carries, it is hers, the one you tried to silence, the singer of that song, the mortal whose voice matched yours too perfectly, the one you buried. Fringe myth, In an obscure Delphic tablet, half erased, mostly water damage, there's mention of a singer whose voice was so like the sun that it dared eclipse it. The myth ends not with a punishment, but with a disappearance. The god could not unmake her, it reads. So he placed her beneath the earth and gave her no ending. You feel the temple tremble beneath your feet. Just slightly. A crack opens in the wall. A breath escapes, not air tone, a single pure aching note. You freeze. Even now, centuries later, that melody still remembers its shape. It wants out. Historians still argue whether Apollo ever truly lost control of Delphi, or whether the oracle in her trances sometimes borrowed voices older than even his. You step back. The Pythia falls silent. Her head bows. She does not wake. And you leave the temple, quickly, footsteps echoing like guilt. There are songs you silence. And there are songs that bury themselves beneath your temples and wait. You don't speak for a while after leaving the temple. The path winds downhill through cypress trees, their tall shadows flickering like fingers trying to catch you. You don't slow. Not until the sound of laughter draws you in like a rope. You find yourself standing before a different kind of temple, now one without oracles or ghosts or buried songs, just stone steps rising in a wide curve beneath the open sky. Epidaurus, the greatest theatre of the ancient world, it yawns before you like a cup turned toward the heavens, its acoustic so perfect that even a whisper on stage can reach the very back row. No tricks needed. Just math, marble, and magic. Mainstream historical fact. The theatre of Epidaurus was constructed in the 4th century BCE and remains one of the best preserved classical theatres. Its sound design is still studied today, often cited as an architectural marvel. They say you can hear a coin drop from the top tier. Tonight, though no coins fall. Tonight, the actors on stage are rehearsing a tragedy, a drama of gods and mortals, loss and fate. And guess what character's missing you? Apollo. Not one line, not even a mention. You sit in the 3rd row, arms crossed, as a woman in a white mask delivers a monologue to the audience. Her voice soars delicate and harsh in turns, like a lyre played with glass instead of fingers. Then a hush. She steps aside, and now a young actor takes the stage tunic, fluttering slightly in the evening breeze. He holds a lyre cheap prop, obviously, and begins to play. The audience shifts. Something is off. The tune he plays isn't part of the script. It's unfamiliar. And yet, you know it. A fragment, a shard, one of the lost notes from the melody you chose never to finish. The actor looks into the distance, not up, not out, but inward. And his voice changes, not in pitch, in purpose. Like he's not acting anymore. He recites a line, a name, her name, the one from the temple, the one you buried. A tremor rolls through the amphitheatre, not in the stone, but in the crowd. People glance at each other. They feel it too, that chill, that knowing. And then the director yells, "Cut!" The actors freeze, confused. That line wasn't in the script. Fringe detail. There's a modern superstition among performers at Epidaurus. Never improvise lines in a god's role. Even today, actors claim strange things happen when they try forgotten words, vanished voices, even sudden illness. Don't tempt the echo, they say. You rise and leave quietly, boots clicking up the marble steps. On the way out, you spot a note scratched behind one of the stage pillars, a simple warning: never play the god. Historians still argue whether such taboos stem from old rites or psychological performance pressure. But you know the truth. It's not about reverence. It's about fear. Some roles carry a melody no one wants to hear again. Some stages, remember, you step away from the theatre down a moon-washed path scattered with laurel leaves and fig shadows. The night grows quieter again, but not peacefully so. It's the kind of quiet that leans in, waiting to be broken. And tonight it will be. You arrive in Thebes, not the bustling, proud city from its golden age, just its bones, cracked walls, silent gates, dusty streets that once carried chariots and chants. Thebes had many legends, many kings, many tragedies. But you're here for one song, one that shamed a crown. It started with a bard. Doesn't it always? Not a priest, not a hero, just a man with a lyre and a voice that people lean toward. He wrote a song about you, Apollo, not a hymn, not a love ballad, a tale. It told of your first mistake. The melody was delicate, clever, slow to unfold like a riddle. It described a time before you were revered, before the temples and gold, before even Delos. A time when you sang a song that twisted itself inside out. A song so beautiful the stars changed their paths to listen, causing a brief celestial confusion that nearly unraveled Olympus's order. You remember the song because you heard it, not directly. It floated in from Thebes, carried by minstrels and curious travellers. It lingered in the wind near Delphi, even dared slip into prayers. You didn't forbid it. Not immediately. You listened. Once. Then you stopped. Mainstream historical fact. Ancient Greek cities often censored performances that challenged or mocked the gods, especially during state festivals. But local bards sometimes risked it, couching criticism in myth. Thebes was famous for this, a city of drama, defiance, and tragedy. The king at the time, eager to prove his devotion to you, banned the song outright. He ordered all copies destroyed, the bard exiled. But the damage was already done, because something changed. Not in you, in Thebes. Its wells soured, its crops failed, its olive oil pride of the city turned bitter. Literally, the taste, the texture, everything. Unusable, unsellable. People whispered that Apollo had turned away. But here's the twist. You hadn't. You just listened and said nothing. Fringe account, a fragment from the Chronicle of Linon, a Theban priest's diary, claims that the bard's song had a second verse. One never performed. It ended with Apollo weeping not in anger but in memory. The god did not strike us, the priest wrote. He mourned through us. Historians still argue whether the story was political allegory or religious warning. But the olives, that made it into every version. You walk now through the overgrown agora, past broken columns and weeds thick as shame, and there, near an old well, you find a single olive tree, gnarled, bent, but alive. You pick one fruit, taste it, sweet. The curse has lifted, but the song's still gone. You never sang it again, not out of pride, but because truth, when sung in your own key, becomes too honest. And honesty, Apollo, was never your most divine quality. You leave Thebes behind under a violet sky, tinged with orange regret. The air grows thinner as you climb again, stone underfoot, sharp and crumbling, as if the mountain itself doesn't want you to reach what's ahead. But you keep going, because you've heard a rumor. There's a prophet who defied you once, not with anger, not with ambition, but with a whisper that didn't align with your melody. And you want to know why. The path leads you to a wind-swept plateau above Athens. There's no temple here, just a weathered hut made from olive wood and old stone, and inside it her, the seeress. Older than she should be, eyes the colour of volcanic ash, skin like parchment that's been rewritten too many times. She doesn't look up when you enter. You don't speak. You wait. Finally, she says, "So, you've come to ask me about the lie." Her voice is smoke and honey. You feel it in your ribs. Mainstream historical fact. Apollo's oracles weren't infallible. Several ancient records, including Herodotus, note instances of prophecies that led to disastrous decisions. Historians still debate whether these were intentional misleads, misinterpretations, or just human failure masked in divine language. This seeress, though, she made her mistake on purpose. She told a king he would win a war. He lost. Thousands died. And yet she was never punished. You sit across from her, letting her silence wrap around you. On the table between you is a small clay bowl filled with ashes. She dips 2 fingers into it, draws a line down your arm. "You asked for truth," she murmurs, "but truth doesn't always echo in your chords, Apollo. Sometimes it snarls. Sometimes it hums beneath the earth like a warning no one wants to sing." You glance at the shelf behind her, scrolls, dozens of them. Some are sealed in wax, others tied with reed string. One set apart bears your symbol, the lyre with no strings. You ask her, finally, "Why did you lie?" She looks up. "I didn't lie," she says. "I changed the ending, fringe detail, a recovered scrap from the Sibylline texts, references a prophecy cut short for mercy. Though unnamed, some believe it refers to a moment when an oracle refused to speak the full doom she foresaw, choosing silence over accuracy. That kind of disobedience would usually bring divine wrath. But you didn't punish her. You couldn't, because in her decision, you saw your own. You ask her what's inside the scroll with your symbol. She shakes her head. "Not for you, not anymore." You don't push. You know better. Historians still argue whether seers served gods or used gods as language for their own ethics. But sitting here in this hut above the world, you realize something. She didn't betray you. She understood you. You rise. Leave the scroll unopened. Some endings are better when they remain unwritten, or sung only in dreams. The wind sharpens as you descend the slope, curling through broken olive trees and low stone walls. You follow it, not out of duty, not even curiosity anymore, but because it calls, to a place no one talks about. You find it near the edge of an abandoned sanctuary, half swallowed by vines and centuries. Columns lie cracked like bones in the dust. An old altar sits crooked as though the earth beneath it finally shifted with discomfort. And tucked beneath a fallen slab of marble, you see the corner of a scroll case. Not a modern cylinder, not even Roman. Older. You kneel, brush away the dirt, and lift it. Inside is a scroll, fragile, browned with age, sealed with a clasp carved like a sleeping bird. Your fingers hesitate, because you know what this is. It's the song, the one you wrote in a fevered night after the death of Hyacinthus, after Marsyas's silence, after you saw what your beauty, your power could do to mortals who tried to echo it. It was never meant to be played, never meant to be found, but you wrote it anyway, because that's what artists do, even gods. Mainstream historical fact. Ancient Greek hymns were sometimes written and hidden, intended for sacred ears only. One rare example is the Delphic hymns to Apollo, rediscovered and partially reconstructed in the late 19th century. Music, even divine music, was always both performance and mystery. You unroll the scroll slowly, and there it is, not just notes, but words, lyrics that bleed across the page like a confession. It's a song not of victory or glory, but of restraint, of what is not said, of what a god feels when even his light casts shadows he cannot clean. You read it once, your chest tightens, you read it again, and suddenly the air shifts. There's movement behind you, you turn. A priest stands in the doorway, barefoot, dust-covered robes patched in a dozen places. He's young, but his eyes are old. He says, "It's not yours anymore." And you know he's right. You hand it to him without speaking, because once a long time ago you silenced this song, not because it was dangerous, but because it was true. Fringe myth. In one nearly lost hymn fragment, a travelling bard in Ephesus claimed to have heard a melody that caused a grove of birds to fall silent and a blind man to see. It was said to be the forgotten breath of the golden god passed down in whispers and never sung twice. Historians still argue whether such myths are remnants of suppressed rites or simply poetic embellishments. But you know the truth. Some songs were never yours to keep. You leave the sanctuary as the sun slips below the hills, and behind you the priest begins to hum, not loudly, just enough for the stones to remember. You walk alone now, no shrine ahead, no audience behind, just the rustle of reeds and the gentle hush of dusk settling like silk across the land. The road winds low and lazy, taking you past a forgotten grove near the river's bend. It doesn't look like much, just a patch of trees, dense and oddly still. But you feel it instantly. Something here is listening. You step into the grove. The air is warmer inside, stale, unmoving. No bird calls, no insects, not even wind, nothing. You look up. The branches are heavy with leaves, but not a single one trembles. There's no birdsong, not one feathered body in sight. You're in the grove where no birds sing. And you know why? Long ago, after you composed the forbidden song before you buried it, you tested it. Just once. In this grove. You played it softly. Not even the full piece. Just the intro. The first 4 notes. Simple. Elegant, haunting, and the birds fell from the trees. Not dead, just mute. As if the sound rewired them. As if music reached inside their feathered minds and plucked out the instinct to sing. They flew away silently and never returned. Fringe detail. A faded papyrus scroll recovered near Thessaly references a sacred grove touched by the god's silent chord, where animals grow still and flocks vanish. It was declared unfit for hunting, sacrifice, or worship. Locals feared it, called it the place of stolen voices. Mainstream historical fact. Some Greek sanctuaries were declared taboo temenos lands, where sound, fire, or even footsteps were restricted, not always because of death, but because of something stranger. The ancients had many names for silence, and not all of them meant peace. You sit now on a low stone at the grove's center. There's a broken lyre here. You recognize it, your own, from that forgotten day. The strings are long gone, but the sound, it's still here. In the hush, in the pressure against your eardrums, in the way your breathing feels just slightly off, like it's syncing with something that's not quite gone. You wonder, what did you put in that melody? What thread of godhood unraveled? You close your eyes. You don't hum it, not even a whisper. Because even now, with all your years and temples and golden statues, this grove frightens you more than war ever did. Historians still argue whether Apollo's silences were metaphorical or theological, whether they reflected taboos around knowledge, memory, or divine grief. But you know this one was real. You rise, step out of the grove. The air instantly lightens. A single bird cries out in the distance. not from inside, from far, far away, and even that call sounds cautious. You walk on, you never return to this place, and neither did the birds. The silence fades behind you like a shadow at dawn, but it clings to your cloak, doesn't it? Not the grove's hush, but something deeper, chosen, cultivated, honed over centuries like a blade, your silence. And tonight you'll hear it reflected, because you're heading toward a celebration, a midnight festival in your name. But not like the old hymns with their stiff processions and neatly folded sacrifices. No, this is different. This is music and madness and memory tangled together in gold thread, the rite of silence. You walk into the valley just as torches flare to life. Hundreds of them carried by dancers in white, their faces half covered by golden masks shaped like your own. They move in slow, spiraling patterns, arms lifting heels, tapping in unison to a rhythm only they can hear. You know this place, a sacred plain outside Delos used once a year on the solstice moon for the rite that commemorates the night you chose not to sing. Mainstream historical fact. Some Hellenistic cults did practice silent rituals, especially those honoring Apollo in his aspect as Nomios the shepherd, the guardian of paths. These rites emphasized stillness, fasting, and internal music, sometimes lasting through an entire lunar cycle. Fragments of such rites were found inscribed near Claros and Delos. Tonight's dancers carry no instruments. They wear small cords around their wrists, each bearing a single broken lyre string. And then at the center of the ring, a woman steps forward, young, radiant. Her mask doesn't shimmer, it absorbs the firelight dark as polished obsidian. She raises her hands and everyone stops, dead still. And you know what's coming, the moment you've both feared and anticipated. She opens her mouth and says nothing. No sound, no whisper, just a shape of the melody, the breath of it. A ghost song. But everyone in the circle understands. They bow, all of them, to a song that's never been played. Fringe myth. An obscure Delian tablet refers to the unheard, a secret sect devoted to Apollo's lost melodies. Their central belief that the greatest gift a god can give is restraint. That beauty held back is more powerful than beauty displayed. You feel it now, not the urge to play, but the pressure, the weight of every unsung note pressing against your ribs like starlight caged in bone. And you realize something strange. They love you more because of the silence, because they imagine what could have been, because they wonder, because they fear it. Historians still argue whether the cult of the unheard was real or an invention of late-era poets craving mystery. But as the crowd slowly kneels in a wave of reverent silence, you know this much. A song can shape cities, but silence, it can shape gods. You close your eyes.
And for the briefest moment you almost hear it. The melody, the one you chose not to play. Then it's gone, and the crowd rises to dance again, soundless, golden, endless. The torchlit valley fades behind you like a candle flickering out in the corner of your memory. You walk now under stars, thick as dust, the night, so still you can hear the soft rhythm of your own breath. The road ahead leads not to a city or shrine, but to a conversation that never quite ended. She waits where the olive trees split into a forked path. One route leads to myth, the other to memory. The muse. Not Calliope, not Clio, not Erato. This one never gave her name. She was the only muse who refused you, and that still stings. You see her now seated on a flat stone, one bare foot, tracing slow circles in the dirt, hair tangled like ivy that's grown too wild to prune. She does not stand, she does not bow, she does not look at you, just like she didn't all those centuries ago, you remember?
You had asked her to inspire you, not out of desperation, never that, but out of entitlement. You were Apollo, god of the lyre, golden-limbed and adored by kings and poets, and even your own twin. You thought she'd say yes, she didn't. Mainstream historical fact. The Muses, though daughters of Mnemosyne memory, were not submissive figures. In certain versions, they were feared as much as loved. Refusing a god wasn't just poetic, it was political. There are even records of cults honoring the silent muse, one who withheld divine speech from those she judged unworthy. You speak first. You never told me why. She keeps drawing circles. Her voice, when it comes, is cool and bright as river light because you already had too many songs. You stiffen. She glances up now, finally. Her eyes are not cruel, but they are not gentle either. Not all music needs to be heard, she says. Some needs to be missed. You ask if she regrets it. That refusal, that withheld melody. She smiles, not sweetly. No, because if I'd said yes, you would have sung the song you buried. And now you understand. She knew. All this time she knew. The melody you sealed. The one from the scroll. The one the birds fled from and the priestess whispered in trance. She knew what would happen if you sang it, and she chose instead to leave you alone with it. Fringe myth. There's a lost dialogue attributed to Euripides in which a muse appears in disguise to a shepherd and warns him to give a song to someone who is not grieving is to carve a statue out of fog. Scholars think it's metaphor, but you wonder if it's something else. Historians still argue whether the myth of the rejected muse is apocryphal or just a poetic way to explain a sudden loss of inspiration in Apollo's later worship. But you now know better. It wasn't that you lacked the power, it's that someone finally said no. She stands, brushes dust from her skirt, walks away. No goodbye, no forgiveness, just the echo of a choice you couldn't undo. You do not follow. You can't. Because silence offered by a muse is the loudest kind of judgment. And you're still hearing it ring. You walk for hours after she leaves. Not because you're lost. Gods don't get lost, but because you don't know where else to go until you see it. A doorway, half sunken into the side of a hill. Cracked marble steps lead down into the earth. No columns, no torches, just a carving above the lintel, a lyre with no strings. You hesitate, then descend. The air inside is cool, breathless. Dust chokes the corners. This isn't a temple, it's a tomb, not of a person, but of an idea. You reach the bottom. A single pedestal sits in the center of the chamber, and resting upon it your final lyre, the last one you ever made. It's untouched. Its wood gleams with soft golden grain, polished by time, but not by fingers. There are grooves where strings should be, but they're gone. Removed carefully, no violence, no break, just absence. You walk around it slowly. You remember when you carved it, after you left Delos for good, after the grove, after the song you buried, after the seeress. You made this lyre, knowing it would never sing. Mainstream historical fact. In some late Orphic mystery rites, participants were shown silent instruments, lyres without strings, flutes with closed holes as symbols of sacred restraint. Scholars believe this may have been an allegory for divine knowledge too dangerous to voice. You reach out now. Let your fingers brush the wood. It vibrates. Not like sound, like memory. You feel every moment this lyre was meant to sing and didn't. Every time you almost picked it up. Every dream where the song returned. and then you remember why you unstrung it, because of what it could do, not to mortals, to you. This lyre was made to hold the melody you sealed in the scroll, the one the priest now carries, the one the grove remembers, the one even the muse feared. You sit beside it. You do not touch it again. Fringe myth. A surviving Alexandrian fragment describes a god who made an instrument for the last note and hid it in the dark so the world might stay whole. Many believe it refers to Apollo. Others claim it was metaphor for Plato's music of the spheres. But a few believe quietly that it was literal. Historians still argue whether the silence around Apollo in later Hellenistic poetry was creative fatigue or cultural shift. But here in this room you know the truth. It was choice, your choice, not out of shame, out of clarity. You rise slowly, the lyre stays, stringless, perfect, untouched, because some endings don't need music, they just need to be left. The tomb fades behind you, swallowed by the hill and the hush. You walk without direction now, not bound by shrine or story, just drifting through twilight's breath. But even drifting has destinations. You feel it before you see it, a presence ancient and coiled like smoke. It doesn't hum, it doesn't breathe, it listens. And suddenly you're no longer in any place you recognize. The trees here don't belong to Greece, they're older. The air tastes like bronze and salt. The stars are wrong. And at the center of this otherworldly clearing stands a stone obelisk, black and smooth, rising like a frozen scream. On it, carved with near-invisible precision, is a fragment of your lost melody. Just the first line. You don't remember placing it here, but you did. Once, long ago, for yourself. You approach, and you hear it again. The song, not from the air, not from the stone, from inside you. All at once it comes rushing back, the full melody. Not broken, not incomplete. The rhythm, the swell, the ache of it. Your fingers remember it. Your breath shapes it. You could sing it now, right here, right now. The urge is unbearable, and so is the knowing of what it would do. Because this song doesn't just move hearts, it doesn't just break silence. It ends things, not violently, elegantly, the way a perfect poem closes the world. Mainstream historical fact. Some Orphic hymns included what were believed to be world-ending stanzas invoked only at the beginning of new cosmologies. These weren't literal, perhaps, but even Plato wrote of tones that could harmonize or disrupt the cosmos itself. The music of the spheres was never just metaphor. You reach toward your lips and stop. You feel something brush your shoulder, not wind, a hand. You turn, no one. Only the echo of choice. And then the echo becomes a voice, not yours. The song's. It says without sound, you don't need to sing me. I exist because you didn't. Fringe myth. A singular line in a ruined Corinthian scroll describes a melody withheld so powerfully that even silence took form around it, circling the earth like a god's last breath. Scholars assume it's allegory. But you no longer believe in allegory. You step back. The song still presses at your chest, aching to be born, but you won't let it. Not because you fear it, because you respect it. Some songs aren't composed for ears, they're composed for restraint. You breathe out, the urge fades, the stars realign, the grove vanishes, you're alone, and the world continues, because you chose not to sing again. You emerge from the realm between realms slowly, like waking from a dream that knew too much. The air around you is back to pine and dust, starlight and gravity. A shepherd dog barks distantly. You're back in the world, and yet something's shifted. You carry silence now, not as absence, but as decision. Still, there's one last place you must go. You arrive just before dawn when the sky is the color of ash and promise. Delphi. Again, full circle. But this time you don't go to the temple or the Pythia or the old cracked stones. You walk instead to the edge where earth gives way to air, and the valley below yawns wide, silver and asleep. This is where the story ends, but not where it began. Because there's one final tale to tell. The day you almost played it. The song. The real one. The full one. It was years, centuries after you composed it and buried the scroll. Long after the grove and the priestess and the lyre without strings. You stood right here on this ledge. The valley was full of voices that day. Mortal worshippers had gathered, filling the slopes with incense and lyres and offerings, and they asked, begged really, play something the world has never heard, and you almost did. Mainstream historical fact. There's record of a mysterious rite once performed only once at Delphi, now lost to time. Called Phoebos Klesis, or the calling of the bright one, it involved complete stillness at dawn, followed by a musical act that was never written down. Its purpose, unknown. That day, you had the lyre in your hands, not the silent one, a new one, freshly strung, carved of mountain wood and polished with myrrh. You tuned it, held it up to the sun, and played 3 notes, just 3, enough to hush the valley. Birds froze mid-flight. Water paused mid-ripple. Even the breeze forgot itself. But then you stopped. The final note, the one that would have completed the pattern, revealed the meaning, closed the circuit. You let it go, not into the air, into you. Fringe myth. One Cretan stone relief shows Apollo with a single finger raised to his lips rather than holding the lyre. Some interpret this as a symbol of secrecy or self-restraint. Others think it's just bad carving. But the pose remains strangely powerful. You step to the edge now. Below, the olive groves glow in the soft hush of pre-dawn. You raise your hand. You could hum it. You really could. But instead, you smile. Because some songs are not for endings. They are the endings. And by not singing them, you keep the story open. Historians will argue, poets will guess. Followers will hum fragments in their sleep, but you'll know the truth. You chose silence, again, and that silence, it echoes louder than any hymn ever sung. The sun is rising now, soft and slow, smearing the sky with pale gold and feathered pink. Delphi breathes beneath your feet, its stones warm from memory rather than heat. You sit on the ledge one last time and let the silence stretch, not as weight, but as welcome. No need to speak, no need to sing, not here. You close your eyes, and for a moment, the world breathes in rhythm with you. You think of everything you've seen, every voice you silenced, every song you never finished, every note you let dissolve before it could bloom. You think of Marsyas's pipes, of Hyacinthus's blood, blooming into flowers, of the priestess who channeled not just you, but the echo of someone you lost, of the boy who stepped into the river without a ripple, of the muse who refused you, and the birds who never returned. You think of your final lyre, unstrung but still awake, and you understand. This silence you've carried, it's not an emptiness, it's not failure, it's a choice made so many times it became a language, the language of restraint, the music beneath music. You inhale. The air tastes like laurel and dust, like endings, but you're not done. You rise, stretch, and descend the mountain slowly, deliberately, your steps echoing like the first soft drum of a new rhythm. You don't look back, because the melody you chose to silence, it is safe now. not buried, held, in the breath between what was and what could have been. And as you vanish into the olive groves below, the sky sings for you. Just once. Not in words, not in sound, in light. And now the grove quiets again. The sun has risen over the stones and fields, but everything feels slower, softer like a candle burning low but steady. You walk gently through your own breath, your own stillness, your own quiet grace. No more questions. No more chase. Just the echo of footfalls on warm earth and the long exhale of a story that chose silence not as retreat, but as mastery. The god of the sun, of music, of poetry, of precision, walks away. Not because the song is over, but because it never truly needed to be sung. And maybe, just maybe, you feel that too, that there are things in your life, longings, regrets, beautiful maybes, that don't need resolution, that don't need to be said aloud. Their truth exists in their absence, their shape carved not by what was, but by what was lovingly, deliberately withheld. So you let your limbs go heavy, your breath long and slow. The world has quieted for now, and you, like Apollo, can carry that silence gently, not to bury it, but to honor it. Let sleep take you the way the golden god took his last note tenderly, without rush. Drift down into stillness, into the hush that holds everything, even you. End of script. Sweet dreams.